behind the scenes, here's what we do. We gather to pour into you guys as frontline Christian warriors. We want to pour into you and encourage you as competitors for Christ. And so we get together once a month, and we have an elite athlete share their story, and then out of that story, we just have a great discussion all about confidence and about soul care and about the things that help us be great competitors for Christ. And so today, Jarod Palmer is going to join us. For those of you guys that don't know Palms was my roommate in college at Miami. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but Palms was an unbelievable athlete. Considered the best stick handler in all of the CCHA back when I played in college. And outside of that, unbelievable teammate, incredible roommate. He was one of the best players I ever played with in my career. Absolutely gifted, and he worked his way all the way to the Minnesota Wild, and I got to watch him just overcome so much adversity in his life. And so, as you can see on my board here, here's some thoughts I had as we were coming in today, and especially for some of you, like you've had an incredible season this year, and it's been off the charts. It's been awesome. For some of you, you're going through a slump right now, and you're battling through it. For some of you, you're battling an injury, and it's a time of adversity where you're just facing an injury. For some of you, your season hasn't gone quite the way you expected, and you're looking at the end of the season, and you're thinking about, what does it mean for next year, and you're trying to finish strong, but you're battling the adversity of the season. Every one of us battles adversity. And for Palms and I, we both have that as part of our story. And I'm sure you'll hear some of that today as Palms shares his and just winning mentally through some of that. But this is what I was thinking. It's actually, this is one thing that my mom would always encourage me with. But I'll tell you what, it was an absolute gold mine of advice. And this is something I think every one of us can take with us. And it's this, that adversity will either motivate you or defeat you. You choose. No matter what adversity you're facing, it will either motivate you or defeat you, and you get the chance to choose what you're going to do with that. And so out of Palms' story, I'm sure some of this is going to come to light. There's a bunch of Bible verses, as you can see, that go with that. All right, James chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds." Right? Counting it joy, that there's purpose in it, and that God does extraordinary things through it. Psalm 66 at the bottom there, it says, it talks about how we've gone through fire and we've gone through incredible struggle, yet God brought us into a place of abundance, is what it says. And so I often will say that sometimes what seem like crazy setbacks are actually God's setups for something greater. And God takes the adversity of our life and he turns it into something good. And so, guys, let's take this to heart today. I can't wait for Palms to share his story. I'm going to pray him in, and then we're going to have a great discussion today, all about a bunch of confidence stuff. And guys, just thrilled to have you. So if you could mute your mic if you're not talking, that'd be great. And then here we go. I'm going to pray us in. Heavenly Father, Lord, I say thank you so much for tonight. And we just ask you to bless this evening as my brothers have prayed at the start. And we ask you to bless Jarod Palmer as he shares his story today. And we just invite you in and ask you to be a part of it. In Jesus' name, amen. All righty. Palms, my man.
All right.
The floor is yours. Would you share your story with us, brother? We can't wait to hear. And we're going to talk all about it tonight.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Gary. And thanks everyone for joining. Just happy to share my story, my life here with Christ, and just try to, I guess, help motivate you guys to have a relationship with Christ and a deeper relationship, right? That's the goal. And so my story started, I'll just start with a little bit of background, and then I'll try to get to about 3 turning points I think were pretty pivotal in my life. And then we'll finish up with kind of my accumulation of what I've learned in my life, and hopefully it kind of helps you skip some of the hard parts in your life. So we'll start off with my background a little bit and just who I am and where I came from. And I was born and raised in Fridley, Minnesota, and it was a school that was really good at hockey back in the 70s, but it was kind of inner city by the time I got there, and really the kind of crime and problems of the cities of Minneapolis started to sort of grow and expand out through my city as I was growing up. And so even though we were kind of a hockey school, we were a lot like District 5 Mighty Ducks, to be honest. It was, we were getting pounded by Edina and the fancy schools around me. And that was my life. My life was going into every game, probably going to lose 10-1 and just scoring one goal. I just want to score one goal, you know? And everyone's like, how do you stay motivated? I don't know. I knew that it wasn't really my fault. It was the accumulation of all the things going on in my city and the lack of tryouts and whatnot. So I just was kind of what you would call an underdog in Minnesota. Yeah, I'm from Minnesota, but I didn't play for the high end schools. My parents were blue collar. My mom was a Clinique counter makeup person. I think she made $13 an hour. My dad was a uh, steel kind of bender, I guess, of some kind, and made kind of airplane parts of some sort at a local factory. And so, very blue collar. They did both. Neither of them graduated college, and so they worked hard jobs and traded off going to work in the day, and my mom worked nights. And so I really kind of had a one parent household for most of my life, and they were Christians. They both went to Liberty, Virginia, and or Liberty University, and they didn't graduate, unfortunately. It probably would have been good. They both left college their junior year. Don't ask me why. I can't figure that out. But hey, it is what it is. And the real story there is I grew up knowing Christ, and I knew, if there was a denomination that we were a part of, it would have been called evangelical. And the story of my life was, every day at church they preached the gospel, and they asked you if you wanted to come to know Christ. And so I came to know Christ every Sunday. I committed my life to Christ just to make sure I did it right. Like, I don't know, probably 150 times. I don't know how many times. I kept thinking I was doing it wrong. And some people said you were too young to do it, so you had to wait till you're older. And so I didn't know exactly how to do it or when it counts, but eventually I think I got there and accepted Christ into my heart. And um, I didn't really know life without him, to be honest. So I don't know exactly what it feels like to come to know Christ later on in life. Um, but I do think it's a very, very powerful thing. I really do. So, but for me, it was always there. And my relationship with God was always there. My belief in Christ and the story of Christ, and communication with God was always there. And I used to pray a lot. I prayed a lot as a kid. I prayed a lot. I still pray a lot, but I just talk to God a lot throughout the day, and just kind of have this feeling that he's always there. He's always watching. He's always knowing. He's always with me, even though I feel like he doesn't care or whatnot. Sometimes I feel upset with God, and I'll get there later, but he's always there. And so that was my life. I always felt his presence, and knew he was there, even if I didn't want to believe. So I think that's sort of a different story for some, but as a kid growing up, it was hard. It was hard to be a Christian in a very challenging world, right? The world we live in doesn't know Christ, and or even if they do, don't act on it in similar ways. And so um, it's a challenging world to be a Christian in, and that's the way I saw the world. I saw the world as a very difficult place to love each other and love your neighbors, and pray for those who persecute you. And I struggle with it my whole life, to be honest, my whole life. So when I wanted to become a pro hockey player, I was about 5, and I wrote it in. Yeah, I had a diary. We'll just call it a diary. Men call it a journal, but let's just skip to the point. It was a diary. I was a 5-year-old or something, and I wrote it down, and I said I wanted to make it to the NHL before Wayne Gretzky did. I wanted to make it there by the time I was 16. That was my goal. And I was pretty serious about it. And I stick handled until my hands bled for many nights, 6, 8 hours a day on the pond. I used to go to the pond, and my friends would come, and they weren't very good at hockey. Nobody in my town made it really, but we would go to the pond, and we would order pizza. We would sit there, and we would play for 3 or 4 hours, and we would play a game of shinny to see who had to buy a pizza. And the pizza would deliver to the warming house. And in Minnesota, you didn't have to have money to go to the pond. It was free. So you could just play for hours and hours and get better at hockey. It wasn't necessarily an extremely wealthy sport in Minnesota. It's a lot more affordable here than in other states. So it's not like everybody is loaded with money when they're growing up and playing hockey in Minnesota. But I certainly battled through some of those things and just puck handled and stick handled, and my father was pretty encouraging, gave me a room in my basement that where I could shoot pucks, and I shot pucks. I mean, the wall was white and it ended black by the time we were done. Like it just we shot pucks. I remember I came home from Team USA and I went to shoot a puck in this little room where I shot growing up, and I shot the puck and it hit the wall and it almost rifled right back in my head. And I thought, oh my God, I can't shoot pucks into here, memoir. It's going to be dangerous. So I had to give up that room at some point, but I remember thinking my parents were awesome for just letting me have there was two concrete walls in the basement with a slab of concrete on the floor. And boy, I shot pucks forever. And it wasn't them. And I like to encourage that if parents are listening, it wasn't parents pushing me. It was me. I was a psychopath. I wanted to make it from the time I was 5. It wasn't my parents telling me. Every now and then, my parents did have to force me to keep my commitments. If I committed to a team, they had to force me to go to practice even when I didn't want to, right? Like there were times where they made me and they backed me to keep my commitments and the things I'd promised, whether I joined a team I didn't want to be on anymore or whatever. They forced me to follow through, and I give them that credit. But for the most part, going down and stick handling, going down and doing plyos or bench pressing or whatever, I was so pumped to do it. Like it was like I almost had to have my parents tell me not to, so I wouldn't get hurt. So when parents are out there trying to push their kids to be successful, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work. So if you want to push your kids, good. Push your kids. Don't get me wrong. Make them follow through with their commitments, but man, they got to push themselves. They got to push themselves because at some point it just gets so easy to quit, especially when you're 25. So if any of you have been there, you know what I mean. Like you gotta be your own coach, and that's what I tell kids all the time. Your coach, you can hire Wayne Gretzky. You can hire Wayne Gretzky to train you for the rest of your life, but if you don't want it yourself, it's worthless. It's totally worthless. You've got to be your own coach, and you're the one who listens to your voice in the side of your head when you're at practice. I remember thinking in my life that when I got to higher levels of hockey, practices would get so challenging. And it's totally false. I got to college and the practices were so simple, I wanted to cry. I was like, I pass the puck and skate and shoot. Are you serious? I thought I was going to be told to drop pass 9 times and circle and loop and throw a flip pass over someone or something. I thought it was going to be the most challenging practices on the planet. And here it's pass the puck to the guy in front of you, catch it with your feet moving and shoot. And I'm like, oh, well, all right. So I had to throw challenges into practice just for me because it wasn't fun. So I'd throw a sauce pass, and when someone threw it to me, I'd purposely kick it to myself, and then I would pretend to fall, get back up, and then shoot because it wasn't easy. It was too easy shooting the puck and skating. And everyone's like, oh, this is so boring. Well, make it fun. Make it fun for yourself. Your coaches can't put NHL players on the ice for you to challenge every day, right? So make it fun. That's my theory on learning to play, and that was me. That was myself challenging myself, and I'd like to push myself out of my comfort zone, and it goes really well with that message of Gary and the backside there. Adversity will either motivate you or defeat you. I got pumped up when the challenge was scary. In fact, when I felt fear, I was excited. I wanted to dive into it because I hated being afraid. I hated being afraid. It feels demoralizing and out of character not being a Christian. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but that was sort of my mentality in life, and that was me as a kid growing up, like bring it on type of mentality. And really a lot of that came from, and I hate to say it, was I had this terrible ball of hatred. And it took a long time for me to lose that. But I honestly, I wanted to make it in the NHL, and I wanted to make it for wealth. I wanted to get there and be special. And I wanted to be honored and exonerated, and people to look at me and be like, wow, look at that guy. And I really wanted that just so I could point at people who made fun of me in my life and who hurt me in my life and be like, you remember that kid you used to make fun of in your math class and whatnot. And I was made fun of a lot. I was made fun of for being poor. You know, I had one pair of jeans when school started. I got one pair of jeans. You know, when school started, I got two shirts, and they were from Walmart, and it was tough. I grew up in a city where there was a lot of kids at school, and they would tear me apart, you know, for wearing the same jeans to school or whatever it was, you know. And all I thought my whole life was, wait, someday I'm gonna make it. That motivated me, and eventually I'll get there, but eventually that motivation burns out, and that hatred, that hatred and anger, it can't last forever, and it's very unfulfilling. And so that drove me a lot. In fact, Gary will tell you, I still had that mentality when I met Gary in freshman year of college. And if you want to tell him how we shook hands, Gary, I'll let you take over if you want for a minute here. But I had that mentality, 100%. Go ahead, Gary.
Palmer is so funny when he talks about all this stuff. I can't help but smile. Dude, when you talk about like challenging yourself in practice, I literally remember like watching you skate up the ice, pretend to fall, put it between your legs, do a 360, and then do a sauce pass to the next guy. And we'd just be looking at you like, Palms, what are you doing? Like, Palms, what is he Palmer doing? And yet he was getting better. He's challenging himself. He's the best stick handler on the ice because he was pushing himself in these ways. I wish I would have learned from you, man. You talk about the time we first met. Palms would describe meeting me as if he met a lightning bolt. I
Right.
walked through the door with my family, and we just came in with nothing but energy and excitement. And Palms was completely on a mission to make the NHL, not make any friends, and graduate. That's the only thing
Right.
that was in his head. And he was just he was friendly, but he was driven, and he didn't want to be my friend.
That's right.
He was,
I told him that. That's right. I shook his hand. It was like shaking an electric buzzer, shaking Gary's hand. I remember being like, "Oh my goodness, this is gonna be interesting." And Gary was so full of life and energy, and I just remember thinking, like, "Dude, just stay out of my way." Like, that's all I could think was like, I got school and I got hockey, and I don't care to make friends. I don't need friends. And he was like, "Well, we're roommates." I was like, "Well, yeah,
I broke him
teammates."
down. I broke him
Yeah,
down over
definitely.
time.
So we did. We became buddies, and we talked a lot. Honestly, I talked a lot. But anyway, the journey to the NHL, if I was to go back in time, was, you know, I was on a mission, and I was on a mission that was really driven from, you know, kind of kind of a position of, I want to prove everyone. I'm going to prove everyone wrong about me. You know, I think the thought in my head was, I'm from Fridley, I got no shot. I'm poor, I got no shot. And, you know, and I wasn't poor in comparison to the real world. I was just poor in comparison to the hockey world, right? And compared to the hockey world, it seems like everyone has money, you know. So it's like, they got brand new sticks, and I'm taking tape off my old stick and trying to rewrap it on my new stick. You know, like, at the time it was tough. You know, I'm using hand me down equipment and all that stuff, and it was a battle to try to have self esteem in that type of environment. But my goal was to prove everyone wrong, and I got to college, and I'll go to a point here where things started to change. I finally made it after my sophomore year of high school. I played for a team that was pretty good, and we had a teammate named David Backus who was being scouted by the NHL. And it's funny how he was a senior, I was a sophomore. All the scouts were coming to watch David Backus. All the scouts, they're coming to watch him, coming to draft him, coming to look at him. But they started noticing me, uh, as this, who was this kid? Where did he come from? And I kind of got on the radar, and I broke my ankle at the end of the year and missed all the summer tryouts for Team USA. And in the middle of summer, they called me and said, "Hey, we'd like to offer you a spot on the team. Would you take it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would." And they're like, "All right, we're gonna, we already talked to your dad last week." I was like, "Oh," and my dad never said a word to me. It was so funny. Anyway, they accepted my, and they said they're sending paperwork, and I got to Team USA, and I'll sum it up. It was a battle. I mean, five of my teammates after the first year quit hockey, like quit hockey. for life. So they couldn't commit. They couldn't do it. And I don't blame them. It was a nightmare. You had to give up your friends. You had to give up everything. You weren't cool in school. No one in school liked us. They hated us, actually. I couldn't even tell anyone I was on Team USA, or they'd throw food at me. It was serious. They would literally throw food at me in the lunchroom. So I was just like, all right, well, so we all ate lunch in some hideaway classroom as Team USA. We're hiding from everyone because we're getting made fun of by everybody so much. And it was like, oh, I thought I'd be popular, but no, I wasn't. And it was a battle. But I came home from Team USA, and I represented my country after 2 years, and I expected my family to be proud of me, and I expected, I don't know, maybe a graduation present, something of some kind. But my family was still kind of, they were still struggling really hard, and I came home to probably the worst situation of my life. Like, my family was dirt poor. My sister was going through a divorce. She's older, and my mom was spending every dollar she had on her lawyer to make sure she could keep her kid. And she told me and my older brother, she told us she had nothing, nothing for us. She couldn't help us. She couldn't use her credit card, nothing. She was spending everything she had on this lawyer. And my dad told me that, basically he wasn't going to help me either. And I was sort of poor, really poor. I came home from Team USA. I had $500 I saved up from working at Larry's Mower Shop. While I was at Team USA, I got a part-time job and cleaned lawnmowers and stuff. And I was saving money for my prom date, but she dumped me, thank God. And so I didn't have to pay any money for anything. So I had $500 to my name, and I bought a car, and I and it was the lowest point of my life. And I really wish I met a family when I was at Team USA. They were my host family, and I really wished I would have asked them for help. If I could go back in time, I would be that 18-year-old kid, and I would call them and ask them for help. I would humble myself and say, I'm so poor. I am hungry. There's nothing for food in the cupboards. There was a gallon of milk. I remember there was 1 gallon of milk in the fridge, and nothing. The cupboards were empty. And I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe how poor we were. And it hurt really bad to come home from Team USA and graduate high school with honors, and then your life went from pretty nice to really terrible when you get home. And I didn't have a room. My bed was way outgrown, so I had to sleep on a couch. And I don't know, it was a tough time. And I remember thinking I should have asked them for help because they were Christians. My host family loves me. They're like my kids' grandparents now. I mean, they gave Gary his first Bible. So I was like, to me, they're like my grandparents now, and they would have helped me. I just didn't, I was too prideful, or honestly, I didn't think they would. To me, I still felt like they thought I was a stranger. So I didn't ask him for help. And instead, I became a criminal. I call it the criminal, but this is why I have a heart for criminals. But I bought a car for $300. I didn't have enough money for insurance. I didn't have enough money for license plates, and I didn't have enough money for gas. But I had to get a car so I could get a job. And I got 3 jobs, but they don't pay you for 3 weeks. So I was dirt poor. I was stealing gas to get to work. I was driving a car without license plates. The guy who sold me the car didn't sign the date on the title, and gave me the pen he signed it with, and said, if a cop pulls you over, put the date on as if you bought it yesterday, and you got a 72-hour period. So I was driving around illegally, and trying to get to work, and I was working my butt off trying to get some money, and I was starving. I was really, really hungry. In fact, I don't know I don't know how anyone makes it through a few days without food, but it's so painful to not eat. And I guess we had milk. We had some milk. We stretched that for 3 days. So, but yeah, my brother and I had nothing. We had nothing to our names, and I got 3 weeks in, and I remember we stopped at a stop sign. It was a stoplight, and this car next to me had it was a guy, and he had a cheeseburger, or it was like a McDonald's breakfast sandwich, and his window was rolled down, and he was next to us at the stoplight. And I mean, we could have rolled down our window and just stolen that cheeseburger or whatever it was out of his hand. We were so hungry watching him eat it. And my brother and I, we looked at each other. We thought about stealing it right out of his hands. And he was in the car. He was in the car next to us. And we thought about stealing his cheeseburger. And we looked at each other like, no, God wouldn't honor that. God wouldn't honor that. Like, that's terrible. Like, just pray. And so we prayed. I remember we prayed and we just hoped God would help us. And we were on our way. We were on our way to work. We were driving around being idiots, and we were starving, just starving. It had been like our third day without food. And he he gave us this tip. We got to our next job and the guy tipped us before we even started working. He tipped us like $20 each. And we were like, oh, before we start, can we were cleaning carpets. It's terrible. But we were like, can we go get food? And he was like, well, that's a little odd, but sure. So we went and got the biggest, juiciest cheeseburgers. I'll never forget it the day I die. It was the best feeling ever. And I remember thinking, my brother and I just looked at each other like really, like I've never thanked God more in my life. As bad as things were, that was it was a really tough time. And um, cheeseburger, amazing what a cheeseburger can do. But at the end of the day, I struggled, and it was a tough time in my life. And I remember being poor even after that cheeseburger. I was really poor, and I remember reading about Job, the book of Job, and when Job was getting hurt, a lot, his family was dying. He was getting disease ridden. Everything, his whole world was falling apart in front of him as far as circumstances. God gave him credit that he never cursed God. His friends were telling him to curse God and die. But Job did complain a lot. And if you look at Job, he did complain a lot. And it was kind of an odd way of complaining to God without cursing God. And I encourage you all to read it. But I remember the one thing Job was extremely honest with God. And if I could encourage any of you today, he knows your thoughts. So there's no point in faking it. And if you're upset with God, he already knows. So you might as well tell him. And that authenticity with God, I think, is what he enjoys and appreciates. Because despite him knowing your thoughts, he doesn't exactly. I mean, he's not you, and he'd rather hear it from your perspective. It's like when you know exactly what happened on the ice, but you want to hear it from your kid's mouth. What happened out there? What happened in this world out there for you? I know what happened, but I want to hear it from you. I feel like God feels the same way. He wants to hear it from us. And I think it's this powerful thing. So I prayed to God a lot, and I just told him I hated him. I told God every day I woke up, and I told God how much I hated him, how much I felt like he doesn't bless me, he doesn't bless Christians, and he hurts us. And I asked him to come down and fight me several times. I said, be a man and come down and fight me like he did with Jacob. If you read the Bible, it says he came down and fought Jacob, or I think it was Jacob at some point. And so I always thought, what a lucky dude. And Jacob won, but then God touched his ankle and Jacob couldn't walk. So something like that. So it's a funny story. It's really odd, but I think it's a really cool moment. And I remember just asking him to do it. Just come down and fight me. I'm so mad at him because I was starving. I felt like I'd done everything right in life, and I was starving. And I wasn't that good of a person. So definitely I was skewed in my mind if I was so good. But at the end of the day, I was driving to work. This was 3 weeks in, and we had enough money to kind of eat a little here and there, and we were doing better. But I was 3 weeks in and into my three jobs, and I fell asleep driving at going 60 miles an hour. And my brother was actually sleeping in the car next to me, or in the seat next to me. And it was 6 a.m. and I was driving into the sunlight, and I worked till 1 a.m. the night before, and just, I don't know, I was pushing myself too much. And the next thing I knew, I fell asleep driving 60 miles an hour. And I woke up and I was mowing down 3 foot high grass and on the side of a highway. And I was headed right for a speed limit sign. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to die. And I just kind of veered to the right to the ditch and landed in this gentle little 2 foot swamp. Luckily in Minnesota, there's lots of ditches of water and swamp, and my car was fine. My brother and I were fine. And my dad actually came to pull us out, and there wasn't any damage to my car. And so to fall asleep going 60, 65 miles an hour and not even have anything wrong with your car afterwards, that's a miracle. And I remember thinking, here I'm telling God to come down and fight me. And I'm praying to him all the time of how angry I am. and he's telling me, I still love you. And I thought, wow, here I am being so ungrateful for how gracious God is. And and I thought it was sort of a wake up moment for me in my life. And that's wake up moment number one. That no matter who I am, what I do, what I say, I don't know why, but God will never leave you. He just won't. And it's nothing I did to earn it, that's for sure. And I think that's part of accepting God into your heart. When you bring in the Holy Spirit into your heart, it never goes away. It never goes away. So that's my own thought behind that. So um, turning point number one was I'm stuck with God, and He's stuck with me, regardless of what I do. And um, big moment for me. So I remember waking up and feeling very grateful about my life and very grateful for God, and I started moving in the right direction from there. As far as I stopped asking God to come down and fight me. I'll put it that way. So at the end of the day, I ended up going to D1 college hockey, getting a scholarship after playing juniors for a couple years. I didn't make it right out of Team USA. I had to go and play juniors in the USHL and played 2 years in the USHL. Played against Gary a couple times actually, and ended up getting a full ride to Miami. It was a battle, long battle to get there, but so I came into Miami as a 20-year-old freshman, and I felt like I had already reached every goal I'd ever wanted. To be honest, all I thought at that point was, I just want to get my education and go get a good job, and if hockey works out, hockey works out. But at that point, it was sort of a plan B, and I hoped I could make it to pro hockey, but really I wasn't drafted, so I didn't think I had a very good shot. And so I kind of faced my reality and said, well, this is probably as good as it's ever going to get. I might as well enjoy it and have fun. And I did. I enjoyed college. I didn't feel pressure. I remember thinking a lot of guys felt pressure because they had agents and they were drafted, and they had all this NHL pressure. And I remember thinking like, oh, that must suck. I'm just here to stay on the team. I just don't want to get kicked off the team. That's all. And so my pressure was pretty low. And I think my expectations from the coaching staff and just in general was pretty low. So anything I did besides being in the gutter was pretty good. So I just imagined, I guess that low pressure on me was good, and I did really well in college, far better than I imagined. And I think it partly because I didn't have the pressure. I didn't have that pressure that a lot of guys have. And I came to a point in my college career where I finally let go of the hatred. Like even in college, I pretty much went through life in a stage of, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm going to prove everyone wrong that some poor kid can from Fridley can be something, you know? And that was sort of my goal. That was sort of my goal. It was more of this internal anger that I wanted to go back to the world of Fridley and where I grew up and show everyone what I had accomplished in my life of some kind. And unfortunately, that was still driving me. And it took a while to kind of break that. And it took some help from a really good mentor named Don DePaulo. And Don kind of walked me through my life a little bit and just showed me that I wasn't such a bad person after all. And I remember sort of letting myself off the hook and thinking, well, maybe I deserve good life, maybe I don't, but I sure as heck don't want to like go through life trying to punish other people or trying to prove something to other people. And it just isn't it's exhausting, to be honest. Being angry all the time is exhausting. So um I knelt down and I had this moment where I forgave everyone in my life, and especially my father. Um I forgave my father for everything he'd ever done, and um it broke me. It broke me down, and my whole world flipped around upside down. And it was my junior year of college, and I just remember um having no idea how to motivate myself anymore. I was no longer filled with anger, with hatred, with I want to prove everyone wrong. And I just loved my teammates and I felt so happy all the time. I didn't know how to play hockey. In fact, I forgot how to play. and I didn't know how to play for a little bit. I was like, how do you play when you're not angry? And so I had to assert my game in a manner of Christ, Christ centered. And I didn't know how to play hockey as a Christian, as a person who loves his teammates and prays for his enemies. And so for me, it took a little bit, but I realized that you can love people. You can love people with a fierceness that that is really incredible. And that's what Jesus did for us. And that's what he asks us to do for others. And that's what I realized was, okay, I'm officially assigned to this team. These people are my teammates, and they're like family. And I need to love them with all of my heart, all of my soul, all of my mind. That's what God is asking me to do. And they're imperfect, and I'm imperfect. And so I didn't do a great job, but it motivated me to play hard, to show them how much I love them. And so it was sort of a different way of blocking shots. Instead of blocking shots like, oh, yeah, I'm so tough, it was more like blocking shots like, oh, that's for you boys. That's for the team, and my motivation flipped, and it was all about for the team. And it was about sacrificing myself for them. And that meant working hard. One of the greatest sacrifices you can make as a hockey player is to skate hard, right? That's a willing sacrifice, and your legs burn, and it's a constant pain. And so to throw yourself into that pain, it's this impressive thing. And when guys do it, when the guys see it, they're motivated. They're like, wow, did you see that guy block that shot? What is he doing? And they start asking themselves, why does this guy play so hard? Is it for himself? Well, I wasn't drafted and I didn't have an agent. So I don't think people thought I was playing for myself, but I think it changed my world, and I'm trying to live life ever since that moment in that motivation. In the motivation that I'm doing it for my family, I'm doing it for the people around me. I'm following Christ's fierce love. And it really is a powerful thing, more powerful than anger could ever be, more powerful than anger. And that's, in my opinion, of what David did when he stepped up to Goliath, right? And in hockey, you're going to face a Goliath all the time. You might face a Goliath as a coach. You might face a Goliath as another player on the other team. You might face a Goliath on your own team. It's going to be tough. You're going to find someone who scares you. Maybe, I don't know. I was scared of some people, and so I always looked at that as, this is my moment to prove to God that that I have faith, that I have a moment here to show God that I have faith. And even though this guy is big and scary and tough, I believe God, with God's help, I can conquer anyone or anything. And he showed us in the story of David and Goliath in one, but he showed us in a lot of different stories where the odds, he loves to show the world, when you have faith, how you can conquer the odds. And that sort of turns people's heads towards him, right? It turns people's notice towards you. And when you love your teammates with a fierce love like that, you can go through things that are very difficult, not for yourself, but for your team, for your really, for your Father in heaven, because he's asking you to put your life on the line for the people around you, for the people in your world, right? And that's what I realized was my motivation from that kind of moment on in junior year of hockey. And it really helped me. It lifted me out of the gutter. And I was I had a really good year. My senior year, I had a great year and led the team in scoring. And an agent asked me if I wanted to play hockey afterwards. And I remember telling him he must be a terrible agent. I was like, you must be the worst agent. Nobody talks to me. And he thought, who are you, kid? And I was like, I mean, I don't plan on making it pro hockey. I'm going to go get a job at Google or something, and try and work my way through life. And he kind of convinced me to play pro hockey. So no, man, you're gonna make it. You can make it in the NHL. And I thought, okay. Well, after a few more agents called me and told me the same thing, I decided to go with the first guy. He ended up being Jared Spurgeon's agent. So had some pretty good players under his belt. And sure enough, I got there. I got to the NHL. I got to the minors. I got to the minors, and uh, and I tried out for the NHL, and that was a whole experience of its own. And I thought I'd just maybe just take a break here. I'd like to talk about what I did to make it to the NHL, um, and how I had some one last pivotal moment there. But just in case anyone has any questions, just thought I'd pause for a minute.
Palms, brother, I got a list of things, man, to talk about with you, brother. You got some incredible things you're sharing that I think we have so much to debrief on. But finish your story here, and then we'll
Okay.
wrap it up. All right, finish your story about
All right.
making it to the NHL, and then we'll wrap it up. And then,
Sure.
friends, if you have any questions, please start putting them in the chat bar. And that way, when Palms is done sharing a story, we can transition into some of those. So if you have any questions, I know some of you have signed as you registered. You sent me some, but if you have any additional ones, please put it in the chat bar here. Go ahead, Palms. You can finish up.
Yeah. So my agent tells me I can make it. I end up my senior year having a really good season. Led the team in scoring and signed a contract. And I remember being a free agent, and so my agent was able to, after my senior year, he laid 3 contracts down in front of me and said, "Which team you want to play for?" And I was like, "Well, where's it nicest to play in the minors? Because I ain't making it to the show." And so he kind of laughed. He goes, "Well, you don't want to play for the Canucks because they never call anyone up, and the Islanders look like they're going to fold. So I'd probably go with the Wild." And I was like, "All right, hometown team, why not?" Houston was a really nice looking city as far as cost of living was pretty inexpensive. So I figured I could stretch my dollar there a little more, and it worked out. And signed a 2-way contract, made it to the training camp tryouts, and I had pretty low expectations. But I remember going into that training camp tryouts, and I remember walking in and realizing I could never make this team. And I knew it from the moment I walked in because I could see the size of everyone's legs. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've been training my legs for 8 years since the time I was 16. And everyone in that locker room dwarfed my legs. And I thought, how did they do that? So I've been training hard for years. And personally, I think it's because, in America, we train wrong. I think we train very wrong in comparison, but, I could get to that later. But at the end of the day, I needed to get bigger legs and become kind of a monster in the leg department. And so I didn't make it very far into tryouts. I was one of the first group of guys to get cut, and got sent to the minors. My head coach in the minors was Mike Yo, and I was very fortunate. He ended up coming from the Pittsburgh Penguins. He won a Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins as an assistant coach. So he had a really tough and strong mentality on hockey, and I think his goal was to become an NHL coach. And so when I played for him, I think he kind of liked how I played. But when I got to the minors, first weekend of games happened. I was healthy scratched first 3 games, and I thought, well, this is kind of odd. I'm healthy scratched and I'm getting paid. I thought, this is strange. I wonder how long they'll keep this up. Probably not long, is what I assumed. As far as like, you don't sit around and do nothing and get paid for very long, right? And so I decided to pump iron, a lot of iron during the weekend, as I knew they weren't going to play me. And the coaches, I remember afterwards, were like, "That's what a healthy scratch is supposed to do," and they yelled at the whole team. They're supposed to pump iron. Oh, I didn't even know they were watching. In fact, I was pumping iron because I had no idea. I had no plans on playing. But okay. Anyway, it was funny. It worked out, and they put me in the lineup, and my goal was just to stay in the lineup, just stay up there and not get out. And I was fourth line and played maybe a shift a period, maybe 2 if I was lucky. But my goal was, I knew how to be a fourth liner, block shots, never turn pucks over, make high percentage plays, and if someone messes with one of your top players, you ask them to fight. And so I did. I asked them to fight. If anyone in my team got cross-checked hard head first into the boards, regardless how big that person was, I'd say, "Hey, that wasn't right. I'm gonna fight you." And I fought people, and I did it very cordially. But my main purpose of doing it was to defend my teammates. It wasn't to hurt anyone. It was to defend my teammates and make sure that they knew, hey, if you're gonna cross check my teammate in the head, you're gonna have me coming asking you to fight and I'm gonna probably punch you two or three times, and just to send a message that you don't hurt people like that for no reason, right? Just because they're good at hockey, that's not fair. So anyway, that was sort of my style. 20 games in, the coach pulls me into the locker room, and he goes, "Jarod, we don't want you fighting anymore, especially in the last 5 minutes of the game." And I said, "All right, why?" He goes, "You're our leading scorer." And I was like, "What?" No, I had a, I call it a superstition, but I didn't look at stats. I stopped looking at stats on the stat sheet because every time I did, I started to suck at hockey. Honestly, I just had this bad thing where if I looked at my stats, I started to play terrible. So I don't know what it was. Even if I had good stats, if I had bad stats, it didn't matter what stats I had. If I looked at the stats and started comparing myself to the rest of the team, I just started playing terrible. So I didn't even know I was the leading scorer. I thought he was messing with me. And um, I thought, all right, I'll try not to fight so much. And so I stopped fighting. And the next 20 games, I had 1 point. And I was back to the bottom of the scoring list. And I'm like, my coach, he tells me, he's like, "Jarod, remind me, I'll never tell you how well you're doing ever again." So I said, "Thanks, coach. Yeah, you really screwed me there." So I thought it was funny. It was just my style. It was what did for me. And it's not for everyone, but for me, I just had to focus on just playing the best I could, playing for my teammates. And if I didn't get credit for a goal or an assist, I didn't even know about it. I didn't even want to know about it, to be honest. I just figured it's all up to the Lord's hands anyway. And half those stats are made up and the guys up top know it. And so you find out when you're looking at making a call up to the NHL, they don't really care your goals and assists. What they care about are your turnovers and your takeaways. How many times did you turn the puck over to the other team? How many times did you take the puck from the other team and give it to our team? Those are your two biggest stats at the next level because they don't even want you to score. They're not calling you up to score goals. They're calling you up to not get scored on. So that's what they're doing. They got their guys that they want to score goals. They're just hoping you can hang and not get scored on. And I found out that's what it was. That's what a big part of it was. And it took me a while to figure that out. But I was really bummed because after a year in the minors with Mike Yo, I never got called up once. And I was really frustrated about it, very angry. I was very upset because I felt like I deserved it. And I'll keep going here. So the next summer, I trained all year in the minors, never got called up. And I always thought I could. A lot of my teammates got called up. That's also what hurt a lot. I was a right winger, and all my right wingers got called up. And so I trained really hard that summer. I was 25 and going into my second year of pro. And I remember thinking, well, this is my last shot. If I can't make it this year, I'm probably not going to make it because they don't leave you in the minors for too long without calling you up. Once you stay in the minors for too long, they end up calling you a minor leaguer for life. So, especially if you're closer to 30, right? And so, which you can make a good living in the minors. Don't get me wrong. I definitely think you can. So, I just think, you know, I had one last shot. I looked at it as I have this one summer to train, and I decided to put all the eggs I had in my basket. And I looked at my legs and I said, time to turn my legs into monsters. And I wanted 32-inch round thighs. And so I measured my thighs, and I heard Peter Forsberg had 32-inch round thighs, and I wanted them to be as big as Peter Forsberg's. And so I trained my legs 4 days a week. I did linear motion training on Mondays, lateral motion training on Tuesdays, day off for abs, stretching, and shooting pucks on Wednesdays, but no legs. And then Thursday, lateral motion training legs, and then linear motion on Friday. And yeah, I did legs I did sprints every morning, linear motion sprints, so straightforward sprints for 45 minutes. I'd go home, I'd eat, I'd stretch, I'd go back to the gym, train for about an hour and 20 on legs. And it would take me almost an hour to just do my squats because I would do about 4 sets of squats. I would get them done in under a minute because I simulated a hockey shift, and I would start at 285 and I would do 20 squats and try to get it done in under a minute. So it was down fast, up fast, down fast, up fast, down fast, up fast. And I started at 285 and worked my up to the 4th set, which was 315. And I could do 315 20 times in under a minute. and do it pretty fast. I was getting to the point where I could jump with 315 by the end of the summer. So I think the squatting I did my whole life was very down, slow, explode up. And I had very bad change of direction in hockey, and I knew that I needed to change how I trained. So I kind of mimicked a lot of the NHLers when I watched them. I was sitting up around watching the NHLers train, and really I put everything I had into my legs. I pretty much trained about 12 hours a day if I include eating, because eating was such an important part. Gary talks about nutrition all the time, but I can put all the weight I want on, but if I don't eat right afterwards and take care of my body, I'm getting nothing. I'm getting no gains. So eating was also a job in its own, taking care of my body, and that took a lot of time. And really, yeah, I watched this video and it motivated me to change how I trained, and I went kind of psycho that summer. But it's called How They Train, and it's about Apollo Ono, who's the fastest man on skates. And he trains 12 hours a day leading up to the Olympics, and he only does like one event for 2 minutes. So, to see that kind of intensity, and here I'm trying to make it to the NHL, which is like being an Olympian. And, I realized I was under training at 3 to 4 hours a day. That wasn't even close to enough. So, and I count preparing my meals and stuff as training, stretching is training. But I took 6 a.m. to about 7 p.m. or 6 or 7 p.m. every day, and put it all into hockey in those summers, and really stayed. What's so funny is I didn't even have a gym membership. I actually trained for the most part on a field of grass. It was a football stadium that was open at my alma mater. And then I trained on the sidewalk in front of my apartment where my newborn child was and my wife. And so I really trained in a very inexpensive type of format. For the most part, I guess at my college I had free weights. I had a free gym membership. So, but I trained a lot on sidewalk and pushing my truck, and very, very rudimentary style of training, because everything everyone had told me my whole life wasn't working. And I knew it wasn't working because I knew I couldn't try any harder. My effort level was maxed. And yet everything everyone had told me wasn't working. So I knew I had to change, not my effort level, because that was maxed. I had to change my style. And that's what I realized. I came up against that wall, because you can only find that out if you actually put everything you got into something, right? You don't know if it's going to work or not unless you put everything you got into it. And if you put everything you got into something and it doesn't work, well, try a different strategy, right? Work smarter, not harder. And so I think that's what I did, and it really beefed my legs up. I got my legs to about 30 inches around each leg, I remember, and I wasn't quite to my goal, but I got really, really, I gained 2.5 inches on my vertical. My sprint was phenomenal, and I really could skate like the wind after that. And so um, that was a big step. Got to NHL tryouts my second time around, didn't make it, got cut the last group of 4 guys. I almost made it, but the last group of 4 to finally get cut, I was in that group. So I played every preseason game. I think it was 6 or 7 preseason games, and yeah, finally got cut. That was painful. Got to the minors, and everyone on my team, again, we had a new head coach in the NHL. Mike Yeo was actually moved up to the head coach. Everyone on my team was getting called up. It was only me and another forward who hadn't been called up. Chris Foucault was his name, and me. And everyone else on my minor league team who was a forward had been called up to the NHL. And I'd been sitting in the minors for months, and I was just stewing of how angry I was. I thought, this is so unfair. I was one of the last guys to get cut out of tryouts. I'm playing pretty well. Like, I remember being so angry at everyone, anyone in my life. If you talk to me, I was rude and I was angry because I felt like I deserved better. And I got to this angry breaking point where I just thought, I can't live life like this anymore. I can't keep doing this. I was exhausted with how grumpy I was. And I wanted to make it the NHL because I put so much effort into it, and I really thought I could do it. And I just couldn't believe that it wasn't happening for me. And I felt like maybe God was screwing me over or whatever, right? And I thought, this isn't fair. And I finally got to this breaking point where I was so tired of being angry and frustrated, and it felt wrong. And I just thought, okay, all right, if this is where God, if this is where my journey ends, if this is where the farthest I get, am I going to be mad at God for this journey? Like, am I going to live the rest of my life being grumpy about how I didn't make it? And that's how I kind of felt at the time. But I remember putting it in perspective and being like, man, I made it so much farther than everyone ever thought I would. You know, I was like, I got so much fun. I actually got paid to play hockey. I mean, the word there is play. I got paid to play. People came to watch. They paid tickets to watch me. How cool is that? I mean, I remember putting everything in perspective and being like, I give it up. I give it up to God. If I make it, great. But if I don't, and this is the best it gets, I'm thankful. And I didn't want to be mad about what I had. Because honestly, when I looked at what I had a nice apartment, I had a wife and a beautiful son, and I was able to pay. I was better off than my parents were. And I just remember being like, I was able to pay for this, and I couldn't believe it, just playing hockey. And I remember being like, you know what? If this is the best it is, if this is all God gives me, it's not that bad. And that was sort of my mentality. And I got like this incredible amount of relief. I'm like, you know what? If this is where I'm supposed to be, if I'm exactly where God wants me to be, then I need, then, then He expects me to be the best I can be here and now. And that's what I remember thinking, like, I need to stop worrying about tomorrow. God has me here. God has me in this place, here and now, with these teammates, with these people, with these coaches. And my job is to be the best I can be here and now. And that's it. And I remember thinking, like, guys can make a decent living in the minors too. Like, I remember thinking, like, I can make a decent living out of this if this is all I make. And thinking it's not that bad. And I started being really grateful for my life and for the things I had. And I actually started volunteering for the team. I had never volunteered before, and not for the team anyway. Not with it wasn't mandatory. And my wife and I volunteered to make these Christmas presents to auction off for charity. And the team was going to sign them and do all this at this game. And we were busy working on these Christmas presents, and you know, it felt good. I felt good. I enjoyed going to practice. I remember having no pressure, being like, "Hey, all I want to do is be the best AHL hockey player I can be. That's it. Just the best AHL hockey player I can be." And that's where I am now, and that's what I'm going to work on. And so I felt a lot less pressure. I wasn't trying to make it to the NHL per se every time I threw a saucer pass. I was just trying to make it better here. And it was crazy. It was a couple of weeks of living that life, living a life of gratitude, living a life of, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to just this is great. It's not so bad. It's life's good. And nothing had changed. My life was still the same it was 2 weeks before. It was just my perspective had changed. And it really came from praying and kneeling before God and being like, I give up trying to control my life, God. I give it to you. If this is where I'm supposed to be, then this is where I'm supposed to be. And that pressure just changed my life, and that changed my perspective. With I was sitting down getting ready for the game where we were supposed to do this auction of Christmas presents for this charity, and I get a call at lunchtime, and the coach says, "Congratulations, Jarod! So proud of you." And I'm like, "For what?" He's like, "Oh, Jim Mill hasn't called you yet?" I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Oh, we never talked." And he hung up. I thought, "Oh crap, what was that?" And then I got a call like 2 minutes later from Jim Mill, the GM, and he was like, or the assistant GM, and he was like, "Jarod, you're on a flight. You're on a flight. You're playing the New York Islanders tomorrow. Get on that flight tonight." And so my wife and I couldn't believe it. And I just remember thinking, this can't be real. I kept thinking the whole time they were going to cut me or send me back at any moment. And I got to the game, and I remember seeing my name on the board. And I remember thinking, like, oh, it's only written in marker. They could erase my name any moment. Like, I'm getting ready to play hockey in the NHL, and I remember still thinking, like, at any moment they're going to tell me you're not playing. And so,
Holmes, come on, man. Do thank you for sharing your story. I love you, brother. And I think there is so many really, really powerful takeaways to take from your story, man. From adversity to forgiveness to surrendering to the Lord when we're in a place that maybe we don't want to be, and other people are getting the opportunity that we're not. Uh, like all of that, like winning in our hearts. Like I thank you for being authentic, man. I thank you for being real. I thank you for sharing about these different challenges and adversities and things. You brought us into your story, into your life, and I'm sure every one of us has so many things that we can take away from it. Given the fact that it's 9:15 or 8:15 where you're at in Central Time, like friends, you have full permission to get off if you need to go. You have full permission. All I ask is that as you're leaving, please maybe put in the chat bar one thing that Palmer's story has encouraged you with. Right, this is one way we bless our guys that share each month, is we just share one thing that really hit us. But if you're able to stay on for another couple minutes here, Palms, I'd love to ask some of these questions that people have put in the chat bar here. And so, friends, you're free to go if you need to, but if you want to stick on for a couple minutes, we'll just ask a couple of these questions, Palms, and end on that note. But man, I'm moved by you sharing your story and getting to run with you through some of that, and I'm humbled by the fact that you massively out-trained me. And I'm like, oh, dude, you worked so hard. And I remember those years. I remember training with you. I remember, I mean, you and I were roommates for years, and just working through so much of that stuff. And yeah, you were the first guy ever to give me a Bible. And so you mentioned, not sharing the gospel. Did you share it with me? And so much of where I am today, now getting to lead a ministry and getting to share Jesus, Lord willing, in a bunch of places, I can trace back to you sharing Bible stories with me in our dorm and you giving me a Bible. And so I'm thankful for you, brother. But let me transition with some of these questions, and we'll end on this note. How do I get both spiritual and physical training in? It's hard to balance my time to do both. So for you, Palms, how did you train hard physically to make the Minnesota Wild, but at the same time keep walking with the Lord? How'd you do that? And I got a couple of these questions, so we'll do these quick.
I think there's this verse in the Bible that says, "The heavens decry my glory." And from my understanding, it's like God is with you everywhere, and is around you all over the place. And he's in the gym with you. So just talk to him, just spend time with him. He knows what you're thinking. So, but he wants to hear it from you. He wants to hear it from you, just like parents want to hear it from their kids. And so, just spend time with him. That's worship. That's prayer, and that's getting closer to God. And just don't forget he's there, even when you feel like he's not. He's there. He's paying attention. He's watching. Bring him with you everywhere. Just one verse. Just think about maybe one verse during the day, and bring that with you to the gym. There's a Martin Luther, the guy who really started one of the first churches, and he put something on the Church of England's door, and it was a pretty profound thing. But at the end of the day, he said he does all things for Christ, and there's other verses that relate to it. But even if he's making pancakes, and so that's a thought when you're training. Don't train for yourself. Don't train for your coach. Train for Christ, because he has you there. He told you to be there. I mean, you're supposed to be there. It's on your schedule, right? So you're there for a reason. He put you in this boat, and so make the best of it. And that's what he wants from you. And don't forget him. Don't leave him behind just because you go to the gym. That'd be my encouragement.
Come on, you bring him with. You have constant conversation. It's a heart level, intimate relationship with the Lord. And even when you're training squats and doing sprints, you're doing it with Jesus. You're talking to him. I love it, man. Come on. Right. That's really good. That's one great aspect, way to think about it. That's a great answer. Here's the next question. A little off the mental side. Let's talk about this. You said America trains wrong. What were some specific ways that you bulked up your legs other than common squats and other workouts? I know you mentioned pushing cars. You mentioned doing linear sprints, lateral sprints. Did you do like Palms? I remember you doing wall sits. Like, what were some things that you did to try to bulk up your legs and train fast? Give a couple of those thoughts, and I'll come on to the next question.
Yeah, I have an article out there. I think it's still a pretty popular article. It's it's a long title, but it's how to gain on ice speed with off ice training, and it's out there for How to Hockey. I think How to Hockey published it, a blog that I wrote for free. But really, a lot of Americans are trained by football coaches. They're football athletic trainers. They're football people, and they train guys in a very, football is 4 to 7 seconds of power and 40 seconds of rest. Hockey is completely different. You're looking at a minute of basically sprinting and 2 minutes to 3 minutes of rest. So train exactly like hockey is, and do it in a cardio way like that, where you're doing 50 to 60 leg pushes in a minute, and that's per leg, right? And so you got to be able to sustain that and do it for 3 periods, and you're probably going to play 4 shifts a period. So that's sort of how I design my training, to be very much rotated around a hockey shift. I also focused my mind. I remember being more exhausted mentally than ever before that summer, because I focused my mind on flexing my hamstrings and glutes and calves. All my life I had been told quads, develop your quads. Quads aren't there for speed. Quads are there to get you low. They're there to hold a low position. They're called long distance muscles. They're X1 muscles, and they're there for long sustained ability. Your sprinting muscles or X2 muscles are the ones that are there for survival. They're there if you get in a race with a cheetah. If someone throws a ball at your head, your neck can move very fast. Your head can move very fast for survival, and those are your X2 muscles in your neck. And so if you want to get faster, develop the muscles that are X2 muscles, and those are all on the back side of your body. Your triceps, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, they're all X2 muscles. They actually help you move faster as opposed to holding a position. And so never trained them really, and I realized that that's what all the Olympic sprinters were doing, and I wanted to get faster on the ice. And they say your vertical jump and your sprinting speed are the two easiest tests to see if you'll be fast on the ice. So if you want to train off ice for a way to get faster on ice, test your vertical jump, and by the end of the summer, be up 3 or 4 inches. And it takes a lot of jumping to do that. And really, I hired an Olympic shot put thrower to help me train that summer. I paid him $100 an hour to come to the gym for me. He only came about 5 times. And yeah, I had some money a little bit to help myself train. It wasn't a lot, but I paid him because he was teaching me how to use my mind to flex my glutes and hamstrings while I was doing squats. So that when I did a squat, every muscle in my entire leg was solid as a rock instead of just my quads. And so it was a very different way of doing squats. It was like doing squats, but it was like doing them in a completely different way. Almost like I was ready to jump. Even though I wasn't moving very fast, I was jumping. And so it helped me. I gained 2.5 inches on my vertical as a 25-year-old. The coaches were stunned. And when I got to the NHL, I remember Brad Bombardier, director of player development, he came up to me and he asked me, he goes, "Palms, how'd you do it?" I was like, "How'd I do what?" He goes, "How'd you gain 1.5 steps at 25? I was like, "Oh, well, I trained like a psycho," but really I trained very different. I didn't do any bench press. I was overweighted on the top. I could bench press 315, and that was stupid when I could only squat 315. Like I was way imbalanced, and I didn't do any arms almost all summer, only legs, and I spent about 5 to 6 hours a day training my legs on those Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesdays off, Thursday, Fridays were legs, and then Saturdays was a skate day, like fun day kind of. But I would usually do something for fun, like I don't know, push my truck. So anyway, that I hope that helps. There is an article out there I kind of wrote and touched on the same things. But yeah, in America, we're very much trained by football. and they gear a lot of things towards football. So
Well said, Palms.
it's tough.
Man, that's well said, man. I'm learning from you, dude. That's really, really well said. Yeah. And here's what inspires me, Palms, and this is an encouragement for everybody on the call. Uh, is Palms, you thought critically. You thought critically. The year in my life when I was fortunate to go from 25 goals to 50 goals in a season, it happened in the summer that I was challenged to think critically. And I was challenged to not just do what I'd always done, or not just do what other people told me to do and be a robot, but I started to think critically. And for you, it was leg stuff. For me, it was learning to think hockey better. Like I needed to get smarter. I needed to become like you and be able to think hockey in a different way and be able to make plays at full speed and become more offensive because of my, like mentally, I could just think hockey smarter. And so I had my way of doing that. I had to think critically to be able to pull that off. You thought critically and came up with a way to train your legs to fix a weakness so you could achieve a goal. And you took a step of faith and were courageous to think critically. I think it's amazing.
I think it's a great point, Gary. It was my weakness, and I had multiple coaches tell me if I was just faster, if you were just faster, you'd make it. So I think you're right. And so at 25, I'm starting to think, how's that possible? But
Yeah.
like you said, I put a lot of thought into it. It was more mentally difficult than anything, for sure.
And I think I'm challenged. I wish you and I would have talked more in those days on that stuff because I probably could have learned from you on that. I know we talked a bunch, but like, dude, I'm inspired. It's really, really inspiring what you did. All right, one couple more questions and we're done. What are some ways, Palms, that when you've lost confidence in your career, you've had moments where you've just been discouraged or you've been overcome by just different things where you feel like you've lost some confidence? How'd you build yourself back up? You talked about becoming grateful. You talked about accepting your circumstances. You talked about letting go of the anger and the hate that had built up. But would you add anything to that in terms of getting your confidence back? And then we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I had a really tough time with that at Team USA. I went into Team USA thinking I was the best player in the world. And reality check, I was probably the worst player on Team USA when I got there. So I was like, oh my goodness, I suck. And really, I struggled for about a year and a half. I was on fifth line. And because they have 5 lines in Team USA and they can dress them all. So it was tough. I played 1 shift a game, maybe sometimes 2. And it was a really difficult time in my life. So I know what that feels like. For me, I kind of went back to the drawing board and I decided to point the finger at myself and said, all right, well, what am I missing that these other guys have? And a lot of it had to do with I lost my hands. One of my biggest strengths was my stick handling, and I lost it because at Team USA, they made us bench press a lot, and they wouldn't let us stick handle in practice. Like we weren't even allowed to shift the puck to our backhand. We had to skate around kind of like a bubble hockey player, which at the time I was really frustrated with, but I kind of get it later. But yeah, I used to hate it. And I couldn't stick handle. I don't know how anyone else could, but I lost my stick handling. I wasn't a great skater, so I really belonged where I belonged and where I was. And it took me, after everyone was done training, it took me putting in another hour of stick handling on this like plastic area they had for us. And honestly, I got in trouble. I got almost suspended for getting kicked out of the weight room. They were trying to kick me out. I was like, how do you guys keep wanting, well, how am I supposed to get better than anyone else here if we're all training the same way? And I'm way at the bottom. How am I ever going to move up the pack if I can't outwork them by stick handling more or whatever? And they actually kicked me out of the weight room, and then they had a talk with the weight coach, and the weight coach started allowing me to at least stick handle after weight training. So I put in a lot of time getting my hands back. And honestly, little wins. Start with something really small. I would just say, I just want to block a shot. My goal was to get on the penalty kill. If I could get on the penalty kill, they'd play me more. So my goal was to block shots and be a maniac on the penalty kill. And sure enough, I started being like a staple penalty killer. And I wasn't even like, in the lineup regularly at all, and I was on the penalty kill anytime I was. And so we got a lot of penalties, and I got a lot more ice time doing it, and that built up a little confidence. So start with super small wins. Find a win that you know you can get, and get one under your belt, so you can kind of get the good feelings coming back, right? Like one block shot, one nice pass, one start simple, and then the things will come easier. They'll come
That's
back to you.
good. Great stuff, Palms. I love that, man. Absolutely awesome. All right. Well, hey, friends. Last question, Palms, actually, from one of our young guys. What was
Sure.
one thing that you would do before games to get ready for your game? And this is the final question, and we'll wrap it up. What was one thing you did before games to get ready for a game?
You know, I used a lot of visualization. It was powerful for me. Um, I had this moment in the power of visualization where I was having one of the worst practices of my life. I know you're talking about games here, but just stick with me. And I was struggling, and I was angry, and I was frustrated, and everything was going wrong at this practice. And my buddy, who was a really good friend of mine, his name was John Witt. He was actually a third string goalie, and he didn't even get to practice. He had to get fully dressed in goalie gear and sit on the bench for the entire practice. And then after practice was over, he could get out on the ice and take shots. So he was sitting on the bench watching me, and he was a good friend of mine. And he goes, "Palms, are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just angry, and nothing's going on. Passes, right." And it was snowballing. My bad luck with snowballing. And he goes, "Palms, just close your eyes and go catch a fish." And I was like, "What?" And so on the ice, right next to him on the bench, he's telling me close my, and he kind of forced me to do it. I was like, "All right, wait, I'll close my," and I closed my eyes, and I caught a muskie. And muskie fishing, if you ever done, is really intense. And I reeled that sucker in, and I just felt way better. I mean, crazy better. And I went out that next shift on this 3-on-2 drill, and I dangled two guys and went upper corner, and was like, "Oh my gosh, that really worked." And I think, putting yourself in that mindset that everything's going to be okay, whether, how you get there, it's really important, man. It's really important. And the one thing that you have going for you is, God loves you, whether you score a goal or not, and he really just wants you to play with honor and with all your heart. That's what any parent wants for the kid. They just want their kid to play with all their heart. And so that would be my goal. Is this? I would visualize 4 or 5 successful plays. Like and honestly, when I was visualizing plays, a lot of times someone would steal the puck from me in my own vision. And I'm like, "No, no, that can't happen." So I had to go back and rewind and like revisualize success again, because I would fear failure even in my own mental space. So definitely go in there, create 3 or 4 simple plays, and come up with some decisions before you even get on the ice that you're going to make. And it'll go so much better for you if you visualize success, visualize that puck going in the net. It's a powerful tool.
Well said, Palms. I couldn't agree more, man. Visualization is powerful. All right, man. Well, hey, let's wrap this puppy up. Palms, I think I can speak for everybody on this call. Your story has really impacted us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you, brother, for sharing. I'm going to pray us out. And friends, as you get prepared to leave today, please put in this chat bar one thing that Palms really, really encouraged you with today. And we're going to bless him with that. We're going to pray for him, just kind of pray this thing out. And I'm actually going to ask Taylor Joseph to do it for us, my man. Taylor, you're up, and why don't you pray Palms out here and just say thank you to him for being on tonight. All right.
Sounds good. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for just allowing Palms to you speaking through Palms tonight and during his testimony, Lord. I pray that you just bless him and his family, and bless everybody that made it onto this call and just be able to get closer to you. Thank you for just showing us resiliency and strength and surrender through Palms here in the story. And thank you for him just probably didn't know at the time, but just what he went through and what he did is impacting others in their lives, and showing them that there is a way just through life in general and stuff. So thank you for that. And I pray that you just bless him, bless everybody on this call, and allow us to have a great evening. In your heavenly name.
Amen.
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 All righty. Holmes, I'm going to stop this recording here.